Well, it looks to me like Michael Flynn would be exonerated based on everything I see. Look, I'm not the judge, but I have a different type of power. But I don't know that anybody would have to use that power. I think he's exonerated everything. I've never seen anything like it. What they did, what they wrote, you see this, General. You wouldn't want this happening to you, what they did to General Flynn. And it's just disgraceful.
It is disgraceful, but it's important that we understand exactly why and how bad it was and push for accountability, justice for Flynn and accountability for those who clearly set him up. We got Sean Davis with us now. He's been writing on this all week, and he is as up on it as anyone. He is with the Federalist. He's a co-founder there. Go to thefederalist.com for his latest. Sean, good to have you back.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right, my man. Let's go. You tell me this piece in particular. FBI closed the Flynn case, dubbed Crossfire Razor, in early 2017. Then what happened?
Yes, it's fascinating. So we learned from documents filed yesterday that had been unearthed by a U.S. attorney out of St. Louis, Missouri at Barr's urging. And these documents show that the FBI, after investigating Michael Flynn for who knows how long, found no evidence that he had done anything illegal, no evidence that he was a secret Russian agent, no evidence that he'd broken laws, no evidence that he'd had any illegal conversations. And on January 4th, 2017, the FBI actually was getting ready to close the case. And in fact, the case should have been closed per text from Peter Strzok, who said it was only still open because of what he termed FBI incompetence. But Peter Strzok intervened at the last minute, said, hey, I need you to keep that case open. You keep that case open. He texted the case agent. And what I find fascinating about this is that happened on January 4th. They knew Flynn did nothing wrong. They put it in writing. On January 5th in the Oval Office, Obama, James Comey, and Sally Yates and Susan Rice have a secret meeting. On January 6th, Comey goes in and briefs Trump on the dossier. On the 10th, it leaks to CNN. And then on the 12th, we got probably the worst crime to happen yet in this entire collusion hoax was an illegal leak to Washington Post columnist David Ignatius detailing allegedly transcripts of phone calls between Flynn and the Russian ambassador done as part of Flynn's job in raising the specter of the Logan Act. So put all together, you can see the fix was in for Flynn. We're pissed they didn't have any evidence on him. So they cooked up that out of nowhere, this Logan Act nonsense, and then perpetrated illegal leaks against him to, quote, in their words, get him fired.
Yeah, I've got to say, Sean, that with the new information in particular, it seems to me that we have to start, one part of this that has always been a very clear objective from the media angle has been to make sure that the Obama administration component of this is never discussed. You brought up this secret meeting. It is completely, to me, it is unfathomable and not in the least credible that Obama's appointee FBI director would not have been briefed on this. Remember, the people that were making these decisions, Comey and Strzok and others, they very much were trying to justify this behavior that they were doing. So why wouldn't, if their actions were legitimate, if they really thought that this was a national security threat that the incoming national security advisor posed, wouldn't they be obligated to at least inform Obama? I don't believe that they kept him. How would they keep him out of this? That makes no sense.
No, I think we now know that this entire hoax and this entire coup attempt against Trump went to the very top of the U.S. government at the time. And I don't think we even have to really go out on a limb to do that because, again, according to texts from our good friend Peter Strzok, when he had texted the agent to say, you need to keep this case open, he immediately texted Lisa Page, because the two of them per Trump were the lovers, texted her just minutes after he was able to keep the case open and said, hey, it's still open. Isn't this amazing? And by the way, the seventh floor is in charge of this. The seventh floor being a reference to the director's suite, James Comey. So it is not conceivable to me that this thing was magically reopened, even though there's no evidence, according to the FBI, that the seventh floor, Comey and McCabe were involved, and that the very next day, Comey, Yates, and Obama and Susan Rice meet to talk about it. And the reason we know about that January 5th meeting is because Susan Rice pinned this very odd email to herself the moment Trump was being inaugurated on January 20th, 2017, saying, "Oh, I just want posterity to know I did everything by the book here. Everything was all good. We didn't do anything illegal. Obama told us to do it by the book." If that's not a smoking gun about what they were up to with Flynn, then I don't know what is.
I think that's hilarious, by the way. The old shoot the email to yourself that says, "I was a good person who did not break the law," period. These people have got to be kidding me. But, I'm sure fake Tapper is going to be all over that one, Sean.
Well, I'm sure he'll be all over it once he gets out of everyone's DMs complaining that they're not being nice enough to him on the internet.
Yeah, that's probably true. We're talking to Sean Davis of the Federalist. Sean, also, just what is it that we now are waiting for in terms of the federal judge that's looking at the case and where we stand with possible exoneration? We're hoping the president doesn't have to use a pardon, because we all know if the president pardons him, even though in any reasonable world he should be pardoned, this is completely insane. I mean, we've got FBI agents who are weren't even sure that he. How can you be not sure that he lied and then have Mueller charge him for lying later? Two, had no real objective reason for even talking to him. I mean, look, I was in the CIA. I used to work with FBI guys sometimes. If they had saddled up next to me, like when we're getting coffee at the machine, they're like, "Hey, Buck, like, remember that thing you did yesterday with that guy? How'd that go?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." And I said something wrong. I wouldn't expect them to slap the cuffs on me. I mean, unless I was talking about, selling drugs on the side or something, but that's what we're up against here. They were having a collegial conversation with someone that was the national security advisor, and then they tried to get him to lie.
They even said it, according to the notes from the top FBI counterintelligence official, which came out earlier this week. He said, "I mean, what's the point here? Are we wanting to get the truth, or are we trying to get him to lie to get him fired?" And I think that's what's so distressing. And you made the point that the agents involved in this initially said, per Comey, per Kay, per their own notes, "We don't think he lied. There's no indication that he was lying." But we get to go back to the Strzok text, because you got to love that this whole thing came crashing down because these two people couldn't keep it in their pants and then couldn't keep their discussions off of government cell phones, just to show you the level of incompetence we're dealing with here. They almost got away with it, if not for that. But according to Peter Strzok's texts, he told Lisa Page, "Oh, yeah, that 302, I basically had to completely rewrite it, or I tried not to completely rewrite it, but I had to edit it and still keep it in the voice of the agent who actually wrote the original form," the agent being Joe Pienka. So we have Strzok in his own words admitting that weeks after the fact, he was going back and editing the original form to make it say things that we think didn't actually happen.
What happens now, Sean? Do you think that we're going to see? Ever since the McCabe non-prosecution decision was made, which I predicted and was correct, I've been saying all along, guys, don't expect anybody that the system likes, that they still, because Flynn was outside the system, even though he was of the system, they hated him, right? There are people inside of it. And this is true of Brennan and the way he feels about other government employees who are tied to Trump, right? There are people who are not part of the cool kid club. And that means that you're going to have this level of immunity even when your malfeasance comes to the surface, as happened with McCabe lied under oath. He's not going to prison. He's not even being charged. Do you think that do you think there'll be any accountability here as we get more of this information, or you think that this is just going to be a political issue?
I don't know. So there's two issues. There's the Flynn case issue, and then there's, the larger FBI and DOJ corruption issue. With the Flynn case, he's got two motions pending. One is to withdraw his guilty plea. He's got a whole bunch of reasons he's put in writing with the court for why he should be able to withdraw it. And the other is a motion to dismiss the case entirely due to egregious government misconduct. Now, the judge in that case has a history of throwing the book at corrupt federal law enforcement officials who try to frame people. They did it in the Ted Stevens case. But he's also a complete wild card. He had a couple of outbursts earlier in the case where he personally called Flynn a traitor. He attacked Flynn's attorney. So what he's going to do, I don't have any idea. I think justice demands that this case be dismissed with prejudice and that all these people involved with it be investigated for corruption. I don't have any idea what Sullivan's going to do there.
And this is perhaps of greater interest to you and me and other conservative media people. But I've seen some of the rationalizations for the new. And remember, now we have the FBI in their own writing saying, how do we get him to lie? What's the, basically, we're going to use the Logan Act, which everyone knows is a joke and preposterous. We're going to completely just do everything we can to nail this guy. They obviously were after him. And, I think it was Warren Buffett who said if the cops trail you for 500 miles, they're going to find a reason to pull you over. That's true. Okay, that's reality. And we know all of this stuff. What are the rationalizations? He's not actually technically a liberal, but, formerly of National Review, David French, talking about how Flynn was doing bad stuff for Turkey. Like, is that where we're going now? Because it seems like Flynn was framed is beyond dispute.
Well, French, you said you wouldn't call him a liberal. I wouldn't call him a conservative. I'd call him an absolute disgrace. This is a guy who praised Adam Schiff when he was lying about the FISA warrants, when he lied about the Steele dossier, when he lied about Devin Nunes, his report. He's someone who attacked Flynn years ago, who said there was absolutely no evidence of an FBI cover-up. And the sad reality is that his morality and his brain have been completely corrupted by Trump derangement. And rather than looking at the facts and looking at the principles at stake, he just goes orange man bad, Flynn man bad. Facts don't matter. He's bad. He needed to go. And it's really just a sad state of affairs that these people are so deranged that they can't admit they've got the central issue really of our generation, of our government, the greatest scandal in American government history. They can't just admit they got it wrong.
You think there's any chance that Trump, if the case is thrown out, let's say, or if they ask for a new trial and the federal government just drops the charges, you think there's any chance that Trump will bring him back in the administration?
I don't know. I've seen people joking about putting Flynn in as head of the FBI to replace Christopher Wray. Now, I don't know if that would be the best idea, but there would be a certain amount of poetic justice in that. But yeah, I don't know if he'll bring him back in. The thing I'm focused on is that the guy deserves justice. The facts deserve to come out. This case was built on nothing but lies, and it needs to be thrown out so that the pardon never becomes necessary. This needs to be thrown out within the system as an example of how corrupt the entire thing was.
I agree. Sean Davis, everybody, thefederalist.com. Go check out his latest there. He's doing great work on this. Sean, have a good weekend. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Buck.
Mark Conko with the Patch says, where's the First Lady? Is she accompanied by a state security detail? Has she engaged in non-essential travel? What is your response to people who say the stay-at-home order and non-essential travel bans aren't being abided by your family? I believe there's a report from Illinois Rising Action that says that she recently traveled to Florida.
Well, first of all, I want to say that in politics, it used to be that we kept our families out of it. My official duties have nothing to do with my family. So I'm just not going to answer that question. It's inappropriate, and I find it reprehensible, honestly, that reporter wrote a story about it.
Oh, you mean that do as I say, not as I do is now the ethical position for politicians to take in the midst of a lockdown pandemic, that if you look at what's happening now, I'm going to keep saying it, this is not making, what we're doing doesn't make sense. Shutting down all these businesses doesn't make sense. Unless they think that somehow we're going to be able to eradicate the virus, it does not make sense. If we're heading for herd immunity, and they're not saving lives, folks, because if the same number of people are going to get infected, if 70% of 100 people get infected over the course of 6 months versus 70% of 100 people getting infected over the course of 3 months, you have the same number of infected people, the same risk to them, the same likely outcome from a health perspective. So what do we, and then they say, oh, well, the health system can't be overwhelmed. I keep looking at this saying, the hospitals are closing for lack of activity. What is not getting through to these people? Oh, it's just, this is a pandemic of fear as well as a pandemic from a virus. But back to Governor Pritzker here. First of all, this guy, I don't pay much attention to the governors in other states because I can't. I mean, there are only a few that I follow with any regularity. It's pretty much New York, Texas, California, Florida, some of the larger states by population. I know Illinois is a large state, but I don't know that much about Pritzker, but I just know that whenever someone's like, hey, billionaire man, isn't your wife going to your mansion in Florida, even though the rest of us are on a lockdown order and told only essential travel? But for her, essential travel is just, getting sunlight on the beach in the mansion, right? That's essential travel. He's like, oh, I used to think that families were left out of this. That's not an answer. That's not an answer. This is a problem. We're going to continue to see this separation of those who are still getting a paycheck and those who are really scrambling and trying to figure out how they're going to keep their, people have pulled together a certain kind of life for themselves. People that are working, they have savings, they have a job, they have a future in mind, they have all these things. And that has been ripped from them. And it's not helpful for wealthy, smug elites to tell those people, shut up, peasant, you don't need a haircut right now, which is what you're still hearing from a lot of folks. A lot of people that have platforms and have power. You're not allowed to point out that this is turning into the biggest economic disaster in the history of this country, which it is. This is going to be disastrous. I know we had my friend Porter Stansberry on the show yesterday, and he's very smart. He knows a lot more about finance than I do, but I watch politics, and politics is driving this ship, not economics. And the political damage that we're doing to ourselves here is stunning. And it may be irreparable. And I mean the political damage as in the politics driving decisions about the economy. We seem to think we're just going to be able to put all this back together. The longer we wait, the longer we do this. That's not going to be the case, my friends. I mean, we're heading toward, what, $30 trillion in debt by the end of the year if we keep doing this? They're talking about $1 trillion for state and local governments. You're going to have bailout of industry after bailout of industry. This money is all coming from us. This money is all coming from really future generations. It's the people in charge. And, there's been unfortunately, a lack of any future planning for future generations. That has defined the United States government for the last 30 or 40 years. They don't really care about what this is going to do to the America of the future. It's the people that are making the decisions now. They want the biggest benefits. They want to run up the debts they want to run up. Doesn't matter. And this is for the rest of us who are sitting here saying, hold on a second, 30 trillion, guys, we can't do this. They don't have an answer other than, be quiet. You don't need a haircut. Well, actually, we do need haircuts. Unless producer Mark gives himself a haircut, though. So that's the good news. At least he's taking care
No,
of
my
it.
wife gives me the haircut.
Oh, she does it for you?
Yes.
That's
that was
probably
well
smarter.
before quarantine.
So you guys, she's an old pro at this.
Exactly. I look fine.
Well, that's good news. But I'm telling you, we're going to reach this non-compliance phase of this, and we should reach a non-compliance phase of this because it's absurd now. This is getting crazy. Okay, May 15th, that's it. No more mandatory quarantine. If states have to make some, adjustments here or there because they have a particular issue and the numbers really do justify it, fine. But after May 15th, man, we should be open for business. That doesn't mean an end to social distancing, no wearing of masks in close quarters. It's not saying throw everything out that we've learned, but this can't keep going. The scene in Michigan is one that I think you're going to see replayed in other places around the country. Let me also say, when I said May 15th, we got to open, I meant New York. I'm talking about New York should open May 15th. I'm not talking about the rest. The rest of the country, as far as I'm concerned, should be open now. For business. Open for business. It's going to be phased. Some businesses won't open. Some places will choose to stay closed. It's about the mandate. People need to understand there's a component here that's about freedom and choice and making your own assessments about risk, which is what we do in our daily lives all the time. The across-the-board lockdown is the problem. I am not saying there is right now no future in which we just wake up tomorrow and say, okay, we're just going to go about life and there's no problem here. But there is a future in which we could say, all right, if you want to open up your nail salon and you want to have your employees, wear masks or take some, indoor precautions, they're willing to show up and there are customers who are willing to show up as well, you should be able to do that. If you want to have your furniture store open, if you want to do these things, you should be able to do that. And if you want to stay home and, still get the Paycheck Protection Program stuff going. And, you want to wait, and you want to wait till July. You want to wait till August. You have that right as well. But we need to allow, the problem I have right now is that we're not letting people make these choices. And I know they say, oh, but it's because you're risking other people. That's not necessarily the case. I mean, you're risking other people. A vast majority of the people aren't infected. So you're not risking other people, right? I mean, and at what point is this too much? At what point are we extending this into a lack of tolerance for risk that's completely unmanageable for society overall? And we simply just can't do it. So I've got to tell you, it's troubling. So anyway, in Michigan, what's going on right now is you had a few hundred protesters who went inside. They said stormed the Capitol. I don't know if it's really, storming the Capitol sounds like they've seized it. They did not seize it. They went there. A lot of them have flags and are open carrying. And open carry, isn't it? I mean, the media is always terrified of anyone who does open carry in a political context. Even when it's completely legal and under state law, there's nothing. We saw this in Virginia, where you had all these open carry Second Amendment advocates, and they would say, I think, freedom and Constitution advocates who showed up to the Capitol. Not a single act of violence, not a single shot fired. Nobody's threatening anybody else. They're just saying, look, we're allowed to carry, so we're going to carry because we're citizens, not subjects. We are not serfs. We are not here to do whatever the government tells us to do all the time. That's not how this works. That's not the fundamental, the underlying and foundational relationship that we have with our government. And it feels like our government has forgotten that lately. It feels like the government has started to think that, well, because there's some science consensus sort of maybe that changes on any given day, because of all of that, they can just override the Constitution and all of our most basic rights. Nope. There is not some special area of the Constitution that says, well, unless you think there's a really bad virus out there, and then you can tell people to stay locked in their homes. This is nuts. At some point, there's going to be, people are going to have nervous breakdowns, and they're going to start saying, I don't care what the local sheriff is going to do or the local cops are going to do. I'm going out. I want to try to open my business. And people have already started to do this. They're effectively daring the government to say, you're not allowed to live until we say you can live. You can't live your life. No, that's on pause because we say so. This is a problem, my friends. This is what it sounded like on the floor of the Michigan State Capitol yesterday, with these hundreds of protesters chanting, "Let us in." They did not, in fact, let them in, but the point was made. They're not going to allow for the continuation of the governor there. I mean, Whitmer in particular, her policies have just been draconian and absurd. It's not protecting anyone, not saving anyone. The power to make these determinations comes from what exactly? Remember, the power to quarantine is well established. If someone is sick, that person then poses with a virus that we all know, or some kind of an infection that we know is a threat to people around them. That person then does pose some risk to those around them. And so to say that you need to be quarantined if you are sick, that's one thing. And there are complexities there, too. And that's not always as straightforward a proposition as we'd like it to be. But to say you might have a virus today or tomorrow or next month, we don't know, but you're going to stay home until we say so, that is mass house arrest, and that is unacceptable. That can't continue as it is. And I'm seeing the rise in, the models are predicting a big second spike. The models are predicting. Yes, there will be more cases of this. There's no future in which there are not more cases of this. So everyone who's doing all the scaremongering needs to just say what they really mean. Are you telling us that you want us to stay in lockdown until the virus goes away, which is going to be at least a year or two from now? Or are you claiming that any reopening and return to normal or something approaching normal life for 320 million Americans who, based on the data out of California, are at a a 0.03 risk of death from this, you're going to tell them they have to stay at home for how long? Oh, no. If they don't do that, then we're all like mass murderers who want Granny to die. I mean, this is absurd. This is absurd. And if the ultimate goal, if they it sounds to me increasingly like the epidemiologists don't want to admit this, the ones that are getting quoted in the media all the time, but we are actually heading for like most of the country getting infected over. Remember, initially it was, oh my gosh, most of the country's going to get infected and 2 million people will die. Well, now we're back to, well, it looks like most of the country, when I say most, I mean it, 60 to 70%. That was the estimate from these epidemiologists that CNN was quoting. You might say, Buck, why do you believe them? And, does anyone deny that? I want to see a refutation of this. How do we prevent 60% of the population over the next 12 to 18 months from being infected with this? What are we supposed to do? Shut down forever? Because if you don't shut down forever, then you are looking like you're going to have mass. And we've already had, New York is already 20%, 25%. So, you look around and you say, how far away are we from this making, and it's only been here, it's been here for a few months. Another important thing, I just want to note this for people keep talking about how this versus a year of flu. The flu season is like 5 to 6 months long, and we've been dealing with this for a good portion of a flu season. But if we're going to compare things, let's at least compare them accurately. The real flu deaths occur around the same period of time that the deaths from the Wuhan coronavirus have been occurring during the calendar year. I just keep seeing everyone talk about this as though it's they're annualizing it, or they're making this a yearly number when it's like, well, this is actually about a 6 month period that you're gauging year in and year out from upper respiratory infection. I know that's a little bit perhaps in the weeds on this, but I do think that's a worthwhile point to keep in mind. Liberate Michigan, Trump tweeted out. I think he's in a tough spot here because he wants businesses to reopen, but he also knows that the left and the libs are going to pounce on him the moment they get an opportunity. The second that there's any opening here for the president to get blamed for this, they'll do it. So he's trying to encourage the states to make these decisions, in part because that's right constitutionally, but also because he knows that if he's the one that's making the final call, especially if it's in a very blue state, it'll all be on him. But it is just, I can't emphasize this enough. We need to reopen or things are going to get much worse in every respect. We need to start going back to work. And remember, going back to work doesn't mean that we don't have these problems, and it's not going to be a celebratory thing. It'll be a bit of an exhale, maybe. It'll be a little bit of progress. There'll be some relief from it, but it's not going to be, yay. We're not all better. We're not out of the woods. But the alternative is just insane. And we've been waiting and waiting and waiting. 2 weeks of shutdown, I've told you. 2 weeks of shutdown, that was manageable, and that was what they promised us. And then they extended it 4 more weeks, and now they're extending it another 2, maybe 4 weeks, depending on where you are, and telling us they may extend it even beyond that. Enough is enough. Those of us who want to go back to some degree of not normalcy, just some degree of living our lives, we should be able to do that. And we should focus on protecting those who are at higher risk from this. And that is the only way forward. The other way is to pretend that we can just keep hiding under our beds from this, which we simply, no one thinks that we can really do that, but some people keep holding out that as an option anyway. We can't do it. So let's stop. Let's come together. Let's be adults about this one and move forward as a society, as a country, as a people. We, the American people, need to have our individual rights and freedom back and deal with this the way we deal with other things, which is with constitutional safeguards in place, accepting that the world is dangerous and imperfect and there are risks. We got to do what we got to do. And I'm here in New York City, going outside, going to stores, subjecting myself to this much more so than 90% of the rest of the country does. And I'm saying this, okay? I know what this thing has done to this city. I know what the risks are. But I also know that my individual risk and other people's individual risk who are roughly of my age anywhere in the country is not so high that we should stop living our lives. We need to keep the economy going so that there is the economic foundation to pay doctors and nurses and keep food on the shelves and keep everything going. We got to keep everything going. That's the best thing we can do for those in the higher risk population. Because can you imagine? I mean, we're already talking about meat shortages and 30 trillion in debt and businesses, and we'll talk about how small businesses are doing. It's not good, folks. Even with the money the federal government's shoveling at them, they're still going to be going under. A lot of them are, and they're never going to reopen. There is a cost to all of this that with every day that passes, it gets worse. And the upside of the continued lockdown, inexplicable right now. Inexplicable. If we're going to go out and face the virus, why aren't we going out and facing the virus? Those of us who choose to do so. That's not everybody. If you don't want to leave, I'm not telling you to leave. If you don't want to subject yourself to the outside world until there's a vaccine, that's your choice. God bless. But those of us who want to go out and are willing to take that individual risk and to take mitigation measures to protect other people as we can around us, and to protect elderly relatives, to protect those in higher risk groups that we love and care about and want to make sure we keep them as safe as we can, we should be able to do that. And I have not heard a compelling reason why we shouldn't be able to do that. And if someone yells about testing one more time, I'm just going to throw photos in their face of empty testing centers all across the country, which is what we have right now. We don't do enough tests. People aren't showing up to take the tests at the numbers that they're telling us to. How do you deal with that?
Think of it. We've spent $8 trillion in the Middle East, and we're not fixing our roads in this country. How stupid is it? And we're not fixing our highways, our tunnels, our bridges, our hospitals even, our schools even. It's crazy.
It does seem like an absurd thing that's happened in the last 20 years when you think of how much money we've spent on foreign wars. For what? For what? I've been in Iraq. I've been in Afghanistan. I would wonder what the only compelling arguments I've heard for the continued U.S. military actions in those countries that have stretched on for years and years are to prevent the psycho jihadists from murdering lots and lots of innocent people and to protect one another because they're deployed over there, meaning our military folks fighting to make sure their brothers and sisters in uniform get home. But as a strategic matter, what exactly have we gotten? And think of all the money we have spent. And this is money. This is our money that is going in. Just shoveling money into Afghanistan. It's a money pit that will never end. And we just keep shoveling money and shoveling money. And now we're facing $30 trillion in debt. And there are places where we're already seeing the small business program does not have the cash it needs to keep businesses alive the way that it was intended to. You had the $660 billion, oh my gosh, it's an enormous number, $1 billion aid program for small businesses. The problem is the Treasury Department came in and said, well, 75% of that money can go for employee salaries and no more than 25% on rent, mortgage, and mortgage interest and utility payments. Well, guess what? Some businesses, their biggest expense by far is their lease. And personnel are not really that pricey in comparison to it. That is especially for smaller businesses that are in high foot traffic areas, restaurants and salons and things like that. The big expense is to have that brick and mortar location for people to come in and conduct, and to buy, patronize your business. And that is not at 25% is not enough. Here's an example. This is in the Wall Street Journal today. Andrea Hans dismissed 25 of her employees on March 17th after New York City ordered businesses like her Manhattan hair salon to close. She and the salon's co-owner, Josie Sanchez, applied for a $174,000 loan through the federal program, but only $43,500 could go to non-payroll expenses, not enough to cover nearly $60,000 in rent for the 2-month period covered by the PPP plan. So they're short almost 20 grand on rent. Where's that going to come from? And remember that this is all because why not just cover all? Why not just tell people that you'll cover whatever their business expenses are. The Treasury will just, send us essentially a voucher, or send us the what's it, producer Mark, when someone's going to pay you, you send them what's it called? I'm blanking on the word. You got to help me out.
An IOU?
No, well, no. Not a memorandum.
An invoice?
Invoice. Thank you. That's it. You send them an invoice. These are my business expenses since you guys shut me down. Well, because that would be even more expensive than the $660 billion. We all know we don't have endless cash, but we keep thinking we do something. Like, we know we don't, but we keep acting like we do. Otherwise, why not give all these businesses what they need to stay open and to survive? Maybe they will, but then we're giving them so much money that everyone's going to start to say, when does our debt just collapse our economy? Or be such a drag on the economy that we never have the kind of productivity and standard of living that we're used to ever again? I think we're approaching that point. I don't mean to be a gloom and doom guy, but I think we're closer than we think.